So the connection between trauma and relationships is really important to understand. Someone with a trauma history may struggle with boundaries or become overly dependent in relationships. Unresolved trauma tends to come with beliefs about ourselves. So I will be attracted to people who present me with that same kind of blueprint. So people think, why do I keep having the same experience over and over again? So we're wired by our early relationships. It's really important to recognize this link so we can show up differently, heal our trauma by going inside and attending to it, and then attract different relationships going forward.
Harley Therapy, the UK's leading experts in therapy and mental health care, right here in London or online.
So the connection between trauma and relationships is really important to understand because our early relationships wire us to certain experiences. So we're wired by our early relationships. And you could think about it like our nervous system is wired by the kind of blueprint of our early experience. And we then expect to continue having this experience. And we have an adaptive strategy, which has helped us to survive this experience. And we'll carry on with this adaptive strategy. How can I manage this experience that I'm having early on and prevent this experience going forward? But it's often the adaptive strategy that we've learned. So for example, focusing on the other, caretaking, people-pleasing, self-sacrificing, will then attract people who fit this blueprint, and we'll find that we have the same kind of experience that we had early on. So it's really important to recognize this link so we can show up differently, heal our trauma by going inside and attending to it, and then attract different relationships going forward. Unresolved trauma, tends to come with beliefs about ourselves. So for example, I don't deserve love. That might be my experience in my family. And I believe that, I've had experiences that confirm that. And on some unconscious level, I believe that. And so I will be attracted to people who present me with that same kind of blueprint or that same kind of feeling because it's familiar to me. So people think, why do I keep having the same experience over and over again? Well, that's why. Trauma impacts our ability to trust, communicate, and connect with others. So, if I've had this experience early on that I can't express my feelings because there's no help available, I'm invalidated, then I don't trust that that somebody's interested in my feelings, that my feelings are important, and I begin to disconnect from my own feelings, and from the possibility that somebody else might be interested in what I'm feeling, and I'll then stop communicating my feelings. If I'm dismissed every time I do, or I'm criticized every time, if I'm shamed and blamed every time I do, and then what happens is that I'm not able to really connect with others reliably because my experience is that they're not interested in what I'm feeling. They're only interested in what they're feeling. So then I stop bringing, my experience. I stop being informed by my experience. I stop focusing on my experience. I stop feeling like I can be vulnerable in relationships. Trauma and complex trauma, which is, really developmental trauma that we've had from early on, and, repeated incidents that seem to confirm the same thing to us, will affect our attachment style. Insecure attachment can be anxious, avoidant, or disorganized. And anxious attachment is really where, we cannot rely on the other. We don't feel safe to rely on the other to be there for us. So we don't feel safe enough then to explore the world and come back to this attachment figure. We actually become preoccupied with the connection with the attachment figure because we don't know where they're going to go, where they're going to be, whether they're going to be there for us. So, this can show up as a kind of clinginess, preoccupation with the other. For example, if, the other person doesn't text me back, I might start to ruminate or get worried about, what's happened to this person. I don't feel like I can rely on the other person being there for me. Avoidant attachment kind of goes the other way in the nervous system, so we're wanting to avoid pain and the experience we've had, so we tend to cut off, can come across as dismissive, dissociate, and just not be present. And that may feel like, we're really not available to the other. We're not empathizing with ourselves. We're not connected to the other. We're not connected to ourselves. And that, again, is a survival mechanism, that may have served us when we're young, but may not be serving us in the current relationship. And then there's the disorganized attachment, which is a bit of both, kind of fluctuating between the anxious and the avoidant, the sympathetic nervous system and the dorsal nervous system, which is the avoidant. And in secure attachment, we're really engaged in the ventral vagal nervous system. When we're kind of looked at, when we can rely upon the other being there for us, when we feel seen and we feel heard, that regulates the rest of our nervous system, and that's when we feel safe and secure. Someone with a trauma history may struggle with boundaries or become overly dependent in relationships because if they're preoccupied with the relationship surviving, with the connection surviving because it's been unreliable, it's not going to feel safe to set boundaries. And when you set them in an insecure relationship, in a toxic relationship, it's not going to go down well. So you're probably going to stop setting them. And when you don't set boundaries, you're attracting toxic, manipulative individuals who can really exploit that. And also, you end up kind of abandoning yourself because you've had to focus so much on the other, and you then depend on the other for validation and for a sense of safety and security, when really that should be coming from your relationship with yourself. But we internalize our external experience, so it's very difficult to create that when we haven't had that from outside. But it is possible. It's very important to pay attention to trauma triggers in relationship as a source of information. So when you're triggered in a relationship, what's helpful is to notice that trigger, to acknowledge to yourself that you're triggered, first of all, because that helps kind of bring your neofrontal cortex, the thinking part of the brain, online. It's very difficult to think when we're triggered. And to begin to notice what's going on for you. What am I feeling? Where is that coming from? And even to go back into the past and understand, where did this wound originate? And what does this part of me need? So I might be feeling abandoned. And, I can actually begin to attend to that feeling of abandonment in myself. And look at what do I need in order to feel connected to myself, first and foremost. And then I can, express what I'm feeling to others and see if they're available. And ask for what I need. And, some people are going to be available and some are not. And that is important information for you, in terms of how much you want to invest in this relationship. And when there are intense emotional reactions in current relationships, fear of abandonment, for example, or wanting to withdraw completely, that is generally a sign that there is early trauma that it's helpful to begin to know about. And we can identify that, by noticing how we feel in the body, and noticing the first time we felt that, and that will take us to the early trauma, and that this is part of what we do in therapy. And it's important to recognize these triggers because, and we see with couples sometimes, that when one part of the couple is triggered into a childhood wound, they may experience their partner as, toxic or invalidating or controlling, when that is really their early experience. So, we tend to project our experiences onto other people, our past experiences onto people in the present. And so then it's really helpful to understand, okay, what was my childhood experience? What do I need now? Is my current partner able to provide that for me? Am I able to provide that for myself? And that's where the healing can begin. So trauma bonding is when, we attract someone else who has a similar kind of blueprint to our childhood wounding. So, for example, if my parent is a narcissist and I learned to survive that by focusing on the other, caretaking, people pleasing, walking on eggshells, I'm going to attract someone who, is all about themselves. I have to look after them. They're not going to be looking after me because that's what I know. That's what I know how to do. Often, really strong chemistry right at the beginning is a sign of that familiar kind of experience. So when we get into relationships, it can be an opportunity to heal the wounding or perpetuate the wounding, and that's what we need to look at. Really, am I just going round and round and having the same experience, or can I begin to heal my wound and then attract a different sort of experience and choose a different sort of experience? Because sometimes people with lots of sort of early trauma and are who are used to chaos and instability will be bored with somebody who is healthy and shows up in a reliable, consistently available way, because that's going to feel, not exciting to them. So that's important to pay attention to. And, trauma bonding is very, very strong in terms of chemistry, in terms of addiction. We can be addicted to these chemicals that are triggered in us, cortisol, adrenaline, then the dopamine, the oxytocin, this constant rupture and repair experience that we may have had when we're young, and then we recognize as familiar when we're, later on in life. So that's important to notice too, because that can really be addictive on a chemical level. Trauma bonds can be broken when we begin to focus inside of ourselves. So, when we've been focusing outside of ourselves to survive, we attract people who take advantage of that. But, often the therapy process is beginning to focus inside and beginning to focus on what the child part of us, the wounded child part of us needs, beginning to provide that for ourselves. So really going inside regularly, noticing the traumatized part of us, showing up consistently for that part with acceptance, with compassion, with empathy, setting boundaries to protect that part. And that begins to create a new internal experience, which means that we're going to start attracting and choosing a different, healthier sort of external experience. The journey of healing has a lot to do with waking up to what's been going on, becoming aware with a kind of fresh perspective of how you have been surviving and have adapted to perhaps toxic environments and toxic relationships early on in life, and how those adaptive strategies lead to you attracting similar, familiar, toxic types of relationships in the present. So when you begin to go inside, with the help of a therapist, and prioritize healing those early childhood wounds in yourself, and caring for yourself, then you will attract people who have something similar to offer, rather than just having the same old experience again, because it's familiar.
Subscribe for more insights from the experts at Harley Therapy, and don't miss our next video.